Hello everyone, this is Professor Kent. This recording is for Chapter 4 and I'm going to be taking up the homework for Chapter 4. These questions are at the back of the chapter, or you can find them as we go through the chapters, the questions at the back of the chapter. Before we start the homework, we've gone through the PowerPoints in the class, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to start with a couple things before we dig into the homework. So first one is Chapter 4 is a process costing, which is a difference from the job order costing. Process costing, when you are producing, mass producing a similar product, one product. So that's when we use a process costing. When you're doing a process costing, we will be calculating equivalent unit. What does equivalent unit means? Units that are partially complete and are part of the working process inventory. They're still in the working process inventory, but they're not fully complete. They're partially complete. The concept, it is a concept of expressing partially completed product as a smaller number of a fully completed unit. So we have a 1/2, you have the other half, 2/2 makes a 1, or you have this side is complete 25, one is complete 75, it makes 100%, or this is 1/3, this is 2/3, that makes it 100% of the fully completed product. That's what it means. You have to calculate the equivalent units. Before we could do that, this is the product. When we're doing a production report, this is the activity. So when we have is, my first one is I needed to account for the units and units accounted. So this is my first step and that's my second step. So we need to keep track of our inventory. When you do that, it says beginning working process. This is in the working process. They're not fully complete. They're partially complete. And then we needed to account for it. Like I said in the classroom, units to account for and the units accounted for, they both are same, but you needed to know how many of units are fully complete, and that's why you needed to calculate the equivalent unit. And from there, if you look at it, the 2,000 units completing the partially processed units in the beginning working process, add the remaining 20% of material and 70%. The word here is remaining, so the word here is remaining. And some units you completed in the same month and you transfer them to the next one. Only beginning and ending will be partially, but the completed one will be 100% completed and transferred. There's a two method of completing the equivalent units. One is a weighted and one is a weighted and one is a FIFO. And the first one is just the weighted, and we're only going to be doing the equivalent unit, so which is your first schedule. So we are going to do this as we're going to put our units to account for and units accounted for. Means you should keep track of the inventory. One is to account for, one is accounted for. That's the first thing. So we start with the beginning working process, started into production, equal to the total units that I need to account for. The total units that I need to account for. Beginning working process, they told us in this case beginning working process units was 50,000, but they were 70% complete in a form of material, 80% complete in a form of conversion. And they given us for the ending, but they told us the department started 80,000 into production, they transferred 2,000 units, so they transferred out. For we needed to account for how many they started. Altogether we had 230,000 units that I needed to account for. Like I said, that these two units does not change, so we have to account for the same units. So total units to account units accounted for. I know my ending working process was 30,000. They told us in the question the 200,000 units were fully completed and transferred to the next department. If they're fully completed, we say completed and transferred out. If they don't tell you, we know that we have to account for 230 units. We already have 30,000 in our ending. That means my 100% complete was my 200,000. Now we're going to go further, even though they did ask for equivalent unit. I'm going to add here my equivalent unit. So UIV. And we are going to have a material and we are going to have a conversion. Your conversion will be your direct labor and your overhead. So your overhead. So to produce, we call it to produce this product. Some companies call it manufacturing overhead, but this is the direct cost, not the indirect. So we have, if they are completed and transferred out, they will be 100% complete in form of a material, 100% complete in form of conversion. If they're 100% complete, I take my 200,000 multiply by the 100, I will get 200,000. And same here, 200,000. We have a ending working process. We wanted to know how much are they complete to make an equivalent unit, how much what percent they are complete material, and what material is a conversion. They told us in the question they are 60% complete material and 60% in a form of material. So we're going to put 60% here. My conversion is 30%. You take 30,000 times 60 to get your how many are fully equivalent to fully completed units. So this will be 18,000 and this will be your 9,000. So how did I get it? I'm just going to put it in here. 30,000 multiplied by my 60. They're 60% complete, and that will give you your 60%. That will give you 18,000. If you multiply the 30,000 by 30,000, it will give you the 9,000 equivalent unit. You need the equivalent unit to calculate the cost per equivalent unit. So these are then we add them, 218,000 units, and this is 209 units, and that's what was my first one. Let's do the second one. Again, it is asking you to do the same thing. We're using the weighted cost method. You will be asked to do weighted. I'm just going to do the same number. Same thing what we just did, but the only thing is our numbers are going to be different. So we're going to continue doing what we did. So for the question number 4.3, so we're doing question number 4.3. So that's what we are doing. So a little bit. So in this case, what we have is compute the number of tons of pulp that was completed and transferred. Sometimes they don't tell you. You need to know. I started off with 30,000 pulp, and then I know my ending is 40,000. They told us we started into production is 200,000, and I know this is going to make it 230. If that's 230, will also be 230. I know they both has to be the same. Then if they don't tell you, I know I take, this is my X, so 230 minus the 40 gives you 190,000. So 190,000 units was completed and transferred out. If they were completed, they were 100% complete in a form of a material, 100% complete in a form of conversion, or we could call it labor and overhead. Ending working process, they were 70% complete and 40% complete. So material, conversion, This is 70. This is your 40%. I take 70, multiply by the 70% by 40,000 gives me 28,000. And then we have is next one we have is I don't have a number. This will be my 16,000. So what we're gonna do is my total equivalent unit will be, I'm just gonna check my numbers again. I did it in my mind. 70, that's good. 20, this is going to be 218,000. And then we have, the question is not asking us to do, but we wanted to master our first thing that we did. So 119 plus the 16, and it is 206. So this is the, they said to do the quantity schedule. When they're asking you to do a quantity schedule, they want you to do the first step, units to account for, units accounted for. This is, if I were to think about it, this is called the quantity schedule. And what I did is I also added the equivalent since we are at that point. Now, we are going to be, of course, learning about, before we go there, I needed to do the same thing using the quantity schedule for the FIFO. But before I get to the FIFO, what I needed to do is I needed to show you the comparison of FIFO and weighted. Weighted is easier. FIFO is a little bit more complicated. For the midterm, you'll be tested on weighted. If we're doing an assignment, the case assignment will be tested through the FIFO. It's the same, but it's not same. But sorry, it's a similar but not same. So now in this case, when you're doing weighted, you combine both working process inventory and the current period units, the units that you started, that you combine them together. But when you're doing a FIFO, you have to separate them. First, you have to complete the beginning, then the units that you started into production, and then carry on doing it. You have to separate all of them where it goes into one pool. This is simple. This is more detailed. When you're using the cost per equivalent unit done on an average number, on an average, these are specific for that current period, what was completed in that period. So you have to separate them. Where under the weighted, you just combine it. Most companies, they don't find it useful, not very useful to assess the cost control. This is more useful, but then some companies still use the weighted average, and because they don't want to go through lot of production reports. So that's, now we're going to do the second one. Now we say that it is more complicated. We needed to separate the beginning, ending, and the started into production. So let's show you how to do that. We're going to do exactly what we did. First one is units to account for and units accounted for. We have a beginning, work in process, started into production. That did not change it. Started into production or process. And we have something called total units that we needed to account for. This is exactly the same. Is going to be total units accounted for. My beginning working process, did they tell us? Yes, they have to tell us. It's in the same question. Sorry, I have to bring the question down. It's the same question that they said to do. So I'm just going to bring this so it's a little bit easier for me to see it. So let's do that a little more. So we're using a FIFO. Before we just did a weighted, so now we're using a FIFO, and we needed to use the equivalent unit for material, labor, and overhead, and we needed to go one more step further to calculate. Oh, that's for brief exercise 5, so that's okay. We are doing 4. So my working process beginning was 30,000. They told us we started 200,000 into production. The total units to account for is 230,000 units. This is also 230. Under FIFO, we needed to keep track of each beginning. We cannot pool them together. So we have a beginning working process. We have completed and transferred out, completed and transferred to a next department, or we call it transferred out. They will be 100% complete, and we wanted to know how much is my ending working process in a process of material and conversion, which is your labor and your overhead. So in this case, I am going to do 70 and 40. So 70% here, 40% here. We said that material is going to be 100% because they're completed and transferred out. Working process, then we needed to know for working process, we only doing remaining that was completed in this current period. So we say remaining material and that was completed and a remaining conversion. So if I had 80%, they were complete when they came in. We only completed 20% in this current period. 70% complete when they came in. We only completed 30%. So one remaining out of the 100. So that's what the word here is. Working process is the beginning, which is going to be your 30. Working process ending, which they told us in the question, it was for working process ending was 40. I know I have to account for 230, and then what this is my X. They did not tell us. That will be my 160,000. So if I were to look at it, if I started into production 20,000 units. Out of that, 40 still in my ending working process. I needed to know that. Then that's how much these 160,000 units that I started and completed. I started and completed 160,000. Or you could do it the other way too. The way we said it, both way is it is easy to figure it out. In other words, you needed to know how much were they started into production, and you needed to know how much was they fully they were fully completed. So 160 was fully completed in that current period. So let's look at my equivalent unit, because we do need to calculate my equivalent unit. Equivalent, even though they're not asking us to do, but let's do that. Well, I have a remaining, so this will be my remaining 20%. It will give me my 6,000, and this will give me 9,000. How did I get it? You take the 20%, multiply by the 30%, and then 30 multiply by the other 30%. That's how I got it. So 30,000 is in my working process. The remaining that I completed was 20%. 30,000 is in my working process. I completed 30%. That's how I got my numbers. My next one is I fully completed it. If they're fully completed, they will be 100%. So I take my 160 here. I take my 100. My working process ending was same. This is my 28,000. This is my 16,000. I add these three numbers, and that is my equivalent unit. So those are my equivalent unit. I'm looking for my calculator. So that is 160. This gives you 194,000. 9 plus the 160 plus the 16, and that gives me 185,000. So they're asking for just the first part of it. They were only asking for the first part, but I did the other step for you too. So now we are going to go to our next one. Of course, we are adding next step to it. But before we add it, they told you everything at the beginning. They told you the equivalent unit. So the right side, when we calculate the equivalent unit, they told you that is in step number 2 that we do equivalent unit. I am going to put it in here. Equivalent units. We have a material, we have a labor head, we have overhead. You could combine these together, and that is called a conversion. So that is called a conversion. So we needed to know we are doing a weighted. First thing is cost for equivalent. That is schedule number 2. And then we're going to do 2 and 3, then 4 and 5 together. So first one is, they told us they have to tell us the equivalent unit. So they did not tell us the units that we started into production or the one is completed into production, but they told us this is your 60,000 units. They told us this is 40,000. They told us this is our 70,000, and these are my equivalent unit under material, equivalent unit under labor, equivalent unit under my 70. So it is made out of my ending working process and made out of completed and transferred out. They did not tell us, but they told us the total units that we accounted for. Total units. Now my next step is they told us the cost per equivalent unit. So I needed to calculate the cost per equivalent unit. We have a working process beginning cost. This is called a cost schedule. So we call it a cost schedule. So this is the cost of working process beginning, and then what we needed, cost added during the year. So they told us the cost here is, I'm going to put it in another ink. So this is my 60,000. This is my cost. This is cost 10,000. And then what we need, this is 50,000, and these are the costs, and this is my total units. I ordered 36 here, 80,000 here, and 30,000 here, 300,000 here. So altogether, this is my total cost that I needed to account for. Total cost that I needed to account for. When you do that, I needed to add them. This is the total cost that I have to account for. If I add them, I'm not going to get that. I am going to get 420,000 here. I am going to get 90,000 here. I'm going to get 350,000 here. So how do I calculate equivalent cost per equivalent unit? Cost per equivalent unit. I take my 420,000 and we want it divided by the material for material equivalent unit. So that is my 60,000. I'm gonna get 7. Did they give it to us? No, they did not. So we needed to calculate it. That'll be $7. So that'll be the even number. I know the cost is 90,000. The equivalent unit that were completed was 40,000 units, and that will give me $2.25. The cost is 350,000, and the equivalent units was 70,000. That gave me $5. So if I were to look for total cost per whole equivalent unit, that will be, I add the 7 for material, labor is $2.25, and $5 is for my cost per overhead cost, and the total cost per equivalent unit will be $14.25. That is your schedule number 2. That's what your schedule number 2. Well, 2 and 3, sorry. So let's go further and see what the question is asking. Now the next step of the question is they're asking you brief exercise 4 is asking you to do is, first they already done the equivalent unit. Now you're doing the next 2 steps. So you're doing the next 2 steps. So of course, equivalent unit is the first step. Second is to calculate the equivalent cost, and then you're going to be reconciling the cost. So I am going to kind of calculate the equivalent unit because that is my first step. UIVALENT. Material, and we have a labor, and we have an overhead. They have to tell us in the question. If they don't tell us, we needed to know how much are they completed, what are they looking for. They're only looking for ending inventory. They told us how much was transferred out. During March, the mixing department completed its processing of 25,000 units and transferred out. We can put it in here. They didn't ask us to do that. Completed and transferred out. And they told us it is going to be 25,000 altogether. They also told us the ending working process. They told us the ending working process was 5,000, but we have material, labor, and overhead. They told us material was 70%, this was 50%, and was my 50%. Can I calculate equivalent unit? Of course. 5,000 times the 75 gives me 3,500. This will give me 25 here. This is my 2,500 here. So they told us this will give me total equivalent unit. They are not asking you to calculate it, but we've been calculating it all along. So let's put it together and then just finish that first one, and then 28,500. My next schedule was to calculate what? Calculate my cost per equivalent unit and the total cost of equivalent unit, the total cost of equivalent unit. And we know that they told us material equivalent cost is 12, this is 3 and 7. These are equivalent costs under they did not tell us the whole thing, but we don't need to do that. You take the cost divided by the unit, equivalent unit, we just trust. If they give us, can I calculate the total cost per equivalent unit? Yes, I add the 3 numbers that give me total cost per equivalent unit, and I'm going to put it in here. That is $22. So 12 plus 3 plus 7 is $22. But they're asking us to compute the equivalent unit of material, labor, overhead for the ending inventory for the month. We know the cost that we have to do is $617, but let's do the whole thing because now we are using the next step, and we're doing of course we're going to do both in one go. We're going to do both. We're going to account for the total. I'm going to finish the whole thing. So first thing is we call it a cost reconciliation. So when you do that, cost accounted for, we needed to account for 617. We need to come to equal to 617. That's what we needed to the cost accounted for, total cost. So that's what we needed to account for under material, under labor. Now the first one is your 25,000 units were fully complete. If they were fully complete, you could do it in a full, or you could just do it material, labor, and overhead. I like to do it in parts, but you could do it fully, whatever you find it easy. 25,000 units, they were fully complete. The cost was, labor was 3, 25,000 was fully completed. The cost was 7. If I put them all together, it will give me the total cost that I accounted for, the units that were completed and transferred out. If I were to do that, 25 multiplied by the 12, I get 300,000. That's my first cost, 25 times 3. My second cost, 75,000. My third cost is 25,000 multiplied by the 7, which is 75. If I add these three numbers, I could add three numbers, or I could have done it in one go. How am I going to do it? 25,000 multiplied by the whole cost. That is your material, labor, and your overhead. That is 22. So if I multiply by the 25,000 by the 22, I will get 550,000. Or if I add these three numbers, will also give me the 550,000. So either one is good. So you could do that. So now my next one is that's what they are looking for, my ending working process. I know ending working process, they were equivalent units were, I'm going to put it in here, material, labor, and overhead. I had 3,500 complete, 25 in form of a labor, 2,500 in a form of overhead. But the cost of material is different, cost of labor is different, cost of a equivalent unit for overhead is different. So now I am going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it together. 3,500 multiplied by the 12 gives me the 42,000. So 42,000. And then next one is 7,500. Next one is 17,500. If I take this cost, my ending inventory equivalent unit cost, if I add them together, it should give me that. Sometimes the question, you could also, this is called, just to see it, you could transfer the equivalent unit. You can transfer these from the top to here too. So just to visually see it, you could transfer it. If you don't want to transfer it, you don't have to transfer it. And this is 3,500, 2,500, and 2,500. Again, these are the units. You don't have to do that. You could do it the way I did it. Whatever you find it easy, that's what you're gonna do. Let's go to our next one. Next one is you have to do the full report here. That is my exercise 14.6. So we are going to do all the schedule, and that's what you would be asked to do it. When you're doing this type of a question, what you do it in a step. So they're asking you to the quantity schedule, equivalent unit, cost per equivalent, and they are they're not asking you to reconcile it, but the next step is to reconcile it. So you're doing what we just did up to now in one. So first one is units to account for. We have a beginning working process, started into production. If you do it without looking at it, it comes very easy. Production, more you do it, the better you will become. The total units, and I know this, they have to be agreed to, they has to be same. So I have beginning is my 5,000, and I started into production is 45,000. Units to account for as 50,000, and I needed to make sure I accounted for those. So this is the first, it's called a quantity schedule, but we do quantity and equivalent together. So we've been doing it together to make our life easier. So we have here is my beginning, in this case, we know my ending working process, that they told us the ending is 8. They don't have to tell us, but they're nice. If they're completed, and transferred out. Complete, they're fully completed and transferred out. So they will be material, labor, and overhead. They will be 100% complete in a form of material, in a form of labor, and form of my material, labor, and overhead. They did not tell us. Oh yeah, they did. So then when they are fully completed, I needed to know how much is this. If they don't tell you, we told you it's 42. So I take 50 minus the 8, which will give you 42,000. If I take 42 plus the 8 will give me 50,000 units. So that is my quantity schedule. And if they were 100% complete, I have a material, labor, and overhead. 100% complete, 42,000 here, 42,000 here, and 42,000 here. They're 100% complete. If they're 100% complete, you just have to add them. Then my ending, I wanted to know how much they are complete. 75% as a material and 50 as my labor. 75, 50 as a labor, and 50 as this. I take my 8,000, multiply by 75%. That will give me my 6,000 units. That was equivalent unit that was fully complete. So equivalent unit, so this will give me 4,000 and this will give me 4,000. How did I get it? 8,000 multiplied by the 50% to get my equivalent unit. So, and I am going to put it in here. We are the units that equivalent unit here. Material was 48,000. Equivalent unit for your labor is 46. And this is also 46,000. So they both are same. I could have kind of combined them together. They are called my equivalent units. So now we're going to go to the next step because they're asking you cost per the cost per equivalent unit. The cost per equivalent unit. So we are going to we're calculating cost per equivalent unit. I needed to find out my total cost, and then I will calculate material, labor, and overhead. These are the units that I am going to use to calculate my equivalent cost. But before we do, we needed to know what is the cost, and they told us in the cost for each one is, in this case it is 4,500. That's the cost. I'm going to change an ink. Let's do that. Cost is 4,500 for the beginning, 1,250 for the labor, 1,875 was the for the overhead, and that is the cost of completing the working process. And that if I add them three numbers together, I get 7,625. And then I am going to go further, and I needed to I needed to know cost added during the period. Or during the month. They told us for the material cost added during the month, 52,800. 52,800, 21,500, and 32,250. And that if I add all these three, and it will give me the total cost in this case. So they told we have to calculate the cost this way, and we needed to calculate the total cost this way. And that cost is 106,550, and the total cost that we have to account for is 114 175, and here is, if I do it this way, it will be your 57,300. Maybe we can complete the whole thing even though they did not ask us to do that. 56,825. I'm adding the numbers to get your 56. No, that's not 56. I did it wrong. Sorry. 1250 plus the 21,500. That gives me 22,750. 1875 plus 32,250 gives me 34,125. So I add the numbers. What that give me? A total cost that for material, for labor, and for overhead. These were the unit for my my material, my labor, and my unit. You can call this an A and you can call this a B to calculate your equivalent unit per unit cost, A divided by B. So for material, 57,300 divided by 48,000, 22,750 divided by 46,000, 34,125 divided by your 46,000. So this is my equivalent cost per material, per labor, per overhead. So I am going to, this is a bit too much. So let's do that. And then on the left, I will have total cost as a whole equivalent unit. So I'm going to add them together. So this will be my 1.1938, 1.2364, and it will be, oh no, I got that wrong again. So I had another number, 22,750 divided by 46. So I think if I add them together, I will get that number. 0.4953412. I think if I add both numbers, I was trying to do both together because they both are same number, and if I add them all three together, it will give me 2.43. I'm just going to double check. 2.431. That is the cost per unit. Now we're going to complete the next reconciliation too. The question is not asking you to do it. I'm just going to finish it because we already have it. So when you're doing a cost per reconciliation, so cost reconciled, and that is the total cost that we needed to reconcile. If I were to think about it, I needed to add 11475. That's how much number am I going to come up with it. Not come up with it, that's the number I needed to account for. Now if I were to think about it, I needed to go to my equivalent unit. So what is my equivalent unit? My equivalent units are only for the transferred out. Sorry, they're for transferred out and for my ending. But I added some of the cost at the beginning too, right? So I needed to first do it when you're accounting for. We are going to put it in here. I'm going to put a cost of completed and transferred out unit. So I cost of completed and completed and transferred out. And we know that we have a material, labor, and overhead. You don't need to put it in here. We just remember you needed to go to the first schedule where your equivalent unit is. I know that we fully completed 42,000. 42,000 units was completed under material, labor, and overhead, and I can multiply by the total cost, which is 2.431 total equivalent cost, or you could do individually 1.1938 multiply by 0.495 multiplied by 0.74. But we don't want to go through all that because it becomes a little bit too much here. So we know that as long you remember the 42,000 here, 42,000 here, and 42,000, and that give me the total cost. I don't have a number because I was trying to complete it. Your solution that I posted in the classroom will not have this, but we are trying to do the whole question. So that is 102. That's the cost that we allocated to the costs that are transferred out. I know I have to reach to that number. I have an ending working process. I'm going to put it in here just to know I have 6,000 multiplied by the 1.1938. I have a material labor overhead 4,000 equivalent unit labor, and the cost is 0.495, and overhead is 4,000. The cost is 0.74. So if I do all three, and that is the cost 6,000 multiplied by 1.1938, I will get 7,162 and 80. My numbers, I cannot ask you guys to double check my number because nobody is here with me. I have to check my own numbers. 1980, overhead is 4,000, and the cost is 74, and that is 29.60. You should be close to that. Maybe you're sometimes out by $10 or something, but that is okay. 80 plus the 102, the number I got 114,204. So we are out by some numbers, but we know that as long your first three digits are correct, you should be okay. So we did the whole report for the we did the whole report for our whole production report for the weighted, and then now we're just going to do the whole production report, just the production report. They're not asking us to do anything. I'm only going to do it to cost per equivalent unit. So I am going to just do this part. Of course, if it's a weighted, your numbers are going to be changed, and your dollar value is going to be the change. So we have, in this case, our numbers are going to change because we have numbers are going to change. Now, how the numbers are going to change, because I have to account for all the inventories, beginning, completed, and transferred out, and working process ending. So what we have is, we have 8,000 in my ending, my beginning is 5,000, and then what I'm going to do is I needed to know how many units were completed and transferred out. If a 50,000 minus the 13, I completed and transferred out 13. So that's how we calculate. 50 minus the 8 minus the 5 will give you 37. And then when you're doing working process, when you're doing a live FIFO, material and labor, we want to know what percent remaining. So this is the remaining 20% we complete, we remaining 40% we complete, and this is also 40%. So this represents the remaining that we completed in the current period. So the remaining units we completed in the current period. So 5,000 times the 20 will give me 1,000. This will be 2,000. Here will be 2,000. I 100% complete. If it's 100, that's 37,000. 37,000. 80%, you're going to do the 7. This is the what we completed in the current period. This did not change. That is my 6,000, and that is my 4. That is my 4. And that is going to give me my 37 plus the 37 plus 1 plus 6 gives me 44. And I got 2 plus the 3, 2 plus the 4 plus the 37. I got 43 equivalent unit. If my equivalent unit changes, of course, everything else changes in the question too. So when you do that, what we have to do is, when you're doing a FIFO, what we have to do is we brought in some costs, and some costs was completed in the period. The cost that was added in during the year, it's also to complete the 5,000 or the units reproduction or partial of your ending working process. So when you do that, we needed to the total cost that we needed to account for is when you're calculating your equivalent unit cost. What we needed to do is we do not need to add we don't need to add the total cost. We're going to add it when we're reconciling it. But here we needed to, the cost added during the year is 52,800. This is 21,500. And here is 32,250. And we're looking for equivalent unit and equivalent unit cost as a whole, or as a whole unit, or by material, labor, and overhead. Cost divided by the unit, cost divided by the unit, cost divided by the unit. So I will have 52,800 divided by your 44,000 units that are in my material. This is material labor unit, equivalent unit under material labor. So you have 21,500 divided by your 43,000, 32,250 divided by your 43,000. So the first one, I think I will have my $20. I needed to calculate my next one. 2,500 divided by 43,000 gives me 0.50. 32,250 divided by 43,000 gives me 0.75. If I add these three numbers, it will give me 2.45 ending. The cost that I needed to account for, I have to account for the 106,250 and the cost that I added during the period. That's what we needed to do. But the question is not asking, they were asking for just the complete part 1 and 2. So now we're going to do the next recording I will do for the problem 4, and it will be for both your weighted and FIFO. I'm going to do another recording for it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and thank you for being part of my classes. Take care and bye for now.